What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back in the video. It's Wednesday. It's time to go over my favorite trade targets for week 9. We'll start off by going over very quickly 5 players that we've kind of been mentioning for the last couple of weeks. Brock Bowers, 3 Baltimore players, Lamar, Flowers, and Derrick Henry, and then selling DeAndre Swift. Bowers, he's a top 2. You could argue one. It's either him or Trey McBride, but a top 2 tight end rest of the season. Now that he's good to go, should be returning this week. Post-bye, so you're going to have him rest of the season. It is pretty unlikely that the team that drafted him is in an amazing spot right now. Let's not forget how amazing Bowers was last season. Best rookie season of all time from a reception standpoint. 112 receptions, nearly 1,200 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And then he starts off year 2, 5 for 103 through only 3 quarters before suffering the injury. He has the 3 games after that, but very clearly still hurt, very clearly limited. If he is fully healthy now, we should expect him probably to be the number 1 overall tight end in fantasy. And it's possible that either the team that acquired Bowers picked up a decent backup between when he got hurt and now. There's been a lot of decent tight end options this season, or that you did. And so either they're kind of okay giving him up because maybe they got Gadsden, maybe they got Finn and something like that, or maybe you're okay giving a Gadsden, giving a Finn, and they're more willing to accept because they're like, okay, this is a decent option I can get. I still don't trust Bowers, something like that. You're obviously going to have to add something else on. But if that team is struggling and you can give like Fannin plus, a running back, wide receiver 2, something like that, maybe that's enough to entice them. Again, reverse also possible if they feel they don't need Bowers as much and they would prefer an upgrade to running back, an upgrade to wide receiver, and to just keep playing Fannin or Gadsden, that's possible too. So I think, checking out those teams, seeing what they want, seeing how they value him. I basically value Bowers amongst the mid-range running back and wide receiver 2. So in that general running back to wide receiver, we'll say 14 to 17 range. That's where I would place, and running back as well. That's where I'd place Bowers rest of the season. So if you're doing a 1-for-1, you'd need that range. If you're doing a 2-for-1 with a tight end, you can go a little bit below that range. And I'd be willing to give up those players for him. As for the Baltimore players, this is probably the last week you'll be able to get them. We've been talking about this for a while. Once Lamar Jackson returns, this is a very bad defense, a very good offense. That's what we love in fantasy. Rest of the season, they're going to be, keeping their foot on the gas. They cannot afford to be losing games moving forward. They know how important every win is. They also play the Bengals' horrible defense in the first week of the fantasy playoffs. And I can promise you that game total is going to be 53, 54 points, something like that. I have Lamar as a quarterback 1 overall rest of season. Derrick Henry is, I think, the running back 8. It's either 7 or 8, but he's in that mid-range running back 1 rest of season. Zay Flowers is like a mid to high end wide receiver 2. I have Zay Flowers ranked rest of season over Cortland Sutton, Ted McMillan, Garrett Wilson, Ladd, Brian Thomas Jr., and Pittman. So straight up, I prefer Zay Flowers over them. I don't always love doing 1-for-1 at the same position because it is still marginal, right? If players are ranked pretty much the same, I can go across positions because then I'm getting something I might be weak at. But if you're just going to flip-flop the exact same position, it feels kind of like you're just gambling at that point. But I still prefer him if you wanted to do the 1-for-1. But again, mid to high end wide receiver 2, this offense is going to be really, really good rest of the season. And this is a much worse defense than they've had in recent seasons. And so when this defense is giving up 24, 27, 30 points in a game, it's going to force the offense to drop 30, 34, 37. And when it's consolidated around not that many players, we're going to get a really, really high ceiling every single week and a relatively decent floor. And again, remember, game script for Derrick Henry. We're going to go over another player later in this video that's a very similar way. But game script for Derrick Henry is so important. They are favored in every single game rest of season. And so you have that going for you. In the games that Baltimore loses, Derrick Henry is not going to be as good, but they're going to be winning either all or most of their games rest of the season, at least winning in the second half. If it happens that the last play of the game, the last drive of the game, things flip-flop, what we're looking for is the winning game script for Derrick Henry, and that's going to be happening rest of the season, so you're going to want him in fantasy. And then for selling DeAndre Swift, not only is he coming off some good games, but you can maybe bait people in a little bit. The next two matchups are also very good. So I think DeAndre Swift next 2 weeks is going to be really good. And truly, if you were someone that's like, I need to win now, you're like, I don't know, 3-5, and you're like, I cannot afford that 6th loss. My running backs are terrible. I do think there's merit to just throwing it away and being like, I need DeAndre Swift over the next 2 weeks. So this isn't something crazy to be like, oh, baiting people into a bad decision. I don't think that's a bad decision if you think you need to win right now. Because I think I did the initial projections. I think he's a top 15 running back this week. I would imagine, I think he's maybe 13th. I'd imagine he's probably top 15 again next week. These are really good matchups coming up. I believe they play the Giants the week after. So again, good matchup. But for you, if you have DeAndre Swift and you're on a good team, right? Maybe you are 5-3, maybe you're 6-2, 7-1, something like that, where you're like, I feel good about making the fantasy playoffs. Target that team that's struggling. Target that team that really needs to win right now and be like, listen, great matchups coming up. He's been doing good. It's hard to trade for running back. They're probably going to give you something good for him. But starting in week 13, the Bears are at the Eagles, at the Packers, versus the Browns, versus the Packers, and then at San Fran. San Fran, that's probably the only matchup you're looking at like, oh, nice. But it's also at San Fran. Easily a chance there that San Fran's actually healthy by that point. Their offense is cooking, and maybe we get into a situation where they kind of can't run the ball anymore. And they've been using Monangai as like the passing down back. So it is the hardest playoff strength of schedule. It is the hardest strength of schedule from week 13 on for the Bears. And like I said, Monangai is a risk at this point. Like it just keeps trending up and up. Set another career and season high. He's a rookie, obviously. Everything for season high is a career high. Set another season high in snap share this last week. They've actually shifted their focus to using Monangai more as that passing down back. Swift has been maintaining the lead in total snaps every week, but Monangai ran more routes. Plus, he had more snaps and more routes run inside the 10-yard line this last week. And if you look after their bye in week 5, Monangai has more than half the snap share inside the 10-yard line in every single one of those games. Monangai is their David Montgomery if Monty also ran more routes than Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, again, I don't think that he's going to take over because Monty was never at risk of taking over the job from Gibbs. But Swift is also not nearly as good as Gibbs is, and he doesn't need to. Like, this isn't saying that Monangai is going to be this like insane pick rest of the season. I think that's in his range of outcomes that he ends up being really good. It's more so saying this production that we've seen from DeAndre Swift, if you look at the last 5 weeks being as brutal as they are, and the trend in more usage for Monangai, we're going to see Monangai scoring more touchdowns, getting more receptions moving forward, and that's just not going to be a good thing for Swift. And when you then have the really bad matchups, the floor is going to be a lot lower than people are seeing right now. So trade him to someone. If you're on a very good team, trade him to someone who is struggling right now, needs to win. If you're like, Nick, that's wonderful and everything, I am not on a good team. I really have a team that's struggling. Unfortunately, I really tried to look at who the like short-term buys are at quarterback, wide receiver, tight end. It's tough because you never really buy short-term for quarterback. If you're making a trade for a quarterback, it basically has to be for like a top 4, top 5 quarterback. There's no reason to trade for any other quarterback. Kind of the same thing at tight end. You're not trading for like the 9th, 10th, 13th best tight end. That is the streaming range anyways, so it's just not worth it. You're going for the top end at quarterback and tight end. And then wide receiver, I looked a lot. Like DK Metcalf kind of came to mind. Great matchup this week, but moving forward, some of them weren't that great. And honestly, I think he's been getting lucky with touchdowns. So there really wasn't anything for the next couple of weeks at those positions. But at running back, I think the number one name you'd go after if you need short-term production, win now mode, is Kimani Vidal. My guess right now is that Hampton, technically he can return after this week. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they hold him out until after their week 13 bye. So they have 3 weeks, week 13 bye. I think then Hampton comes back week 12 bye. Week 13, I think Hampton returns, is not featured necessarily because he'd be coming off injury, but is, the more featured back, and then through the fantasy playoffs, he'll be featured. So I think long-term, he's still good. But short-term, I think you basically get 3 games of close to featured production from Kimani Vidal. And in those 3 games, they're playing the Titans this week, the Steelers next week, and the Jaguars after that. As things stand right now, those are all 3 positive matchups. The Chargers are favored in all 3 of those games. And the big kicker, their offensive line looked a lot better last week after getting both their left and right tackles back from injury. Vidal's also looked great as the starter. There's no way that like Haskins, Patterson, like these guys are not taking the job from Vidal while Hampton is out. So I really think most likely outcome here, 3 weeks of Vidal as the clear starter. Tough to like fully value a 3-week rental because he's also not like a top 5 running back, right? I think he's basically a top 15 running back over the next 3 weeks. Kind of difficult to fully value that because it does just depend on exactly what you need. The hope is that Vidal is on a team that's clearly playoff bound, like a 6-2 team that has a very, very high likelihood of making the playoffs. Maybe they look at Vidal and they're like, okay, my team's good enough where I don't necessarily need to start him right now. Maybe I would be, but like I can afford losses or I have a good enough team to where like it's not that big of a projection hit. But long term, it will be because starting in week 13, you basically won't have Vidal as an option at all. I mean, he could hit free agency by week 14 or 15. And so if the team that has Vidal is playoff bound, my gut says that something like a stable flex player can get that done. Truly, it's just going to take talking to that manager, seeing what they're weak at. Are they weak at, tight end, quarterback, wide receiver? Maybe you have a strength there, can get something done. I would not give up like a clear running back 2 for him, but maybe someone would want him for like Monty, for Kamara, maybe someone like Keenan Allen, Xavier Worthy, players like that, where like maybe you can afford to lose one of those players because we'll want Vidal over Monty and Kamara in the short term, and then maybe have a lot of wide receivers. You can give one of them up for Vidal. I think someone in that general range where they're going to have value in the fantasy playoffs, whereas Vidal won't. And so long term, it is a loss for you, but short term, it's a win. I wouldn't go up to someone like Warren or Chase Brown at that point. Like you might as well just keep them because they're not only going to have long-term value, they have decent short-term value as well. So it's not even a guarantee that Vidal outscores them over the next month. But yeah, I think like a flex-worthy player for him would be good. In terms of buys for the fantasy playoffs, with truly like that's what you should be doing for the most part. Like I do get Vidal again. I listed him as the guy for short term. I think that is the best play if you're looking short term. Personally, it's not as much my play style. I like to play risky. I would much rather risk it, build a team for the fantasy playoffs. And if I happen to just miss, that's okay because, I didn't sell out for the short term and then get crushed in the playoffs. Because like if you're selling everything for the next couple of weeks, but you're selling it to these really good teams, and then you have to play them in the playoffs, and then your team is worse, and their team is now way better, you're probably just going to lose them anyways. Like I'd rather just not make playoffs at that point. Go for it. Becomes a situation where sometimes maybe you hold on to players a little bit too long. So you do have to kind of make that call. If you are 3 and 5 is probably the cutoff of like you're in the danger zone. If you've got guys who are going to miss a lot of time moving forward, you might have to dump them and get something else. But my goal is always to like look into weeks 15 through 17, see what matchups stand out, hope that my team can get there into the playoffs. And if we do, and we get healthier then, and we have good matchups, it doesn't really matter. Like unless your league has a bye, which some do, but if your league doesn't have a bye, there's no difference between the number 1 seed and the last seed that makes it into the playoffs. And so I want to be targeting the playoff matchup because all you got to do is squeak in and then anyone can win there. To me, the clearest values are Justin Jefferson, basically all Commanders players, except for probably like Ertz, and then selling J.K. Dobbins and Travis Kelce. We'll start off with Justin Jefferson, Vikings, number 2 remaining strength of schedule, number 1 playoff strength of schedule for wide receivers, starting in week 14, so the week before the fantasy playoffs. They're home versus the Commanders, at the Cowboys, at the Giants, and then home versus the Lions. That is a crazy good schedule for wide receivers. It does include 3 dome games, which you love to see, especially later in the season when, games that are like at Chicago, maybe not going to be that great for wide receivers. When you got 3 dome games, the weather is going to be perfect in those spots. We do have to contend with the unknowns around McCarthy, but I feel like you also have that working in your favor because everyone understands that there's unknowns with McCarthy, even the person that has Justin Jefferson. Jefferson also been largely disappointing this season, not from like a player standpoint. We know that he's still good. He's getting open and everything, but he is 15th in fantasy points per game, half PPR scoring. Of course, you drafted him as like a top 5 wide receiver, basically because he's only scored 1 touchdown, which did happen to come from JJ McCarthy. So the underperformance you have kind of working on your side. You kind of mix in the unknowns around McCarthy and people just not knowing if he's good. That's some risk there. Kind of have that work in your favor as well. Maybe that's enough for someone to just be willing to trade him away where they wouldn't trade him away in normal circumstances. And I don't see things really going that south. Like, number one, how good was Wentz? Like, he was good at times, but he wasn't that good. And I know everyone kind of thinks right now that McCarthy stinks. Most quarterbacks, even bad ones, can get the ball to Justin Jefferson. It's not that difficult to do. And given the schedule, the only thing holding him back would be McCarthy just being really bad. But the camp reports were really good. Like, he had a very good camp. People were very excited. Beat reporters were very excited about him in camp. And truly, he had one bad game. Like, people were pumped about McCarthy. Starts off a little slow in the first game, but then has that awesome comeback in the second half. Looks fantastic. People are really excited. Then he has one bad game against the Falcons, who also forced Josh Allen into his worst game of the season. And it now seems like the market just like views it as a foregone conclusion that McCarthy is bad. Maybe he is. I'm not like writing that off as a possibility. It is absolutely possible McCarthy is just bad right now, and it takes him a couple years to develop. But Wentz has looked horrible in the past 2 weeks. And so, again, it can only be so bad. I have Jefferson as my wide receiver 7 rest of the season. I would trade away any wide receiver not named Puka, Jamar, JSN, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Rashee Rice. Any wide receiver not on that list, I would trade away for Justin Jefferson. Again, my favorite trades are the 2-for-1s, 2 lesser players for the 1, but anyone not on that list, I'm okay trading away for Jefferson. As for the Commanders players, it's similar, honestly, to my take on the Ravens once Jaden Daniels is back, which could be this week. I don't know if it's going to be this week or next week, but it's a short-term injury. It should be soon. Once that happens, everyone's value goes up. The Commanders also have the number 2 playoff schedule for quarterbacks, number 2 for wide receivers, number 1 playoff schedule for running backs. I specifically think Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is the number 1 buy low across all positions this week. So I kind of want to go over him in depth. Again, I would be good trading for any of Debo, Terry McLaurin, Jaden Daniels, understanding these like unknowns around like Terry McLaurin's injury, unknowns still around Jaden Daniels' injury. Like, you're not selling them for like draft day prices, right? You're still trying to get them at a discount, but I would still want them long term, and I'd be okay assuming that risk because if they gain full health, this offense is going to be awesome. But specifically, JCM, Bill, I think he's a great buy low. Yes, the results have been terrible recently. That's why he's a buy low, right? The best buy lows are not the players who are scoring 25 fantasy points per game. No one is trading those players away. People only trade away people who are not performing in fantasy. If you look at full PPR points, though, 7.8, 4.2, and 2.5 over the last 3 weeks. He is 50th among running backs in full PPR scoring over the last 3 weeks. Here's the thing, though. I kind of mentioned Derrick Henry earlier. I am not comparing JCM to Derrick Henry. He will never be as good as Derrick Henry. Pretty much no one will be. But in terms of like fantasy production, basically, we know that Derrick Henry is very, very, very game script dependent. He does unbelievably well when they're winning and unbelievably bad for who Derrick Henry is when they're losing. And it's a very similar story for JCM. Again, obviously a worse player in a worse situation. So the floor is lower and the ceiling is not as high. But when the Commanders are winning and scoring a lot of points, he's going to have really, really good games in fantasy. But when they're losing and not scoring that much, he's going to post duds. They've been losing, I think it's like 70% of the time recently. So all the game scripts have been bad. And that's why you've seen like McNichols out there a ton, because when they get down big, it's not going to be a JCM game. And that's not great. But they've also lost 2 consecutive games by 22 and 21 points. That's also not going to happen moving forward with Daniels back at quarterback. But even over this time, where they've been losing these games, haven't been playing very well, when you have these McNichols games, right, you would think, okay, McNichols, he's their passing down back, he's mixing on the ground. But he really hasn't been. I mean, they still use JCM as that early down back even when they're down. He's maintained at least 70% of the running back carries in every single game over the last month. It is very clear. When they're losing, they still want to be giving carries to JCM until they get down huge, in which case they give no one carries. But in these games that are close, McNichols is not going to be getting carries. Chris Rodriguez is not going to be getting carries. It is all going to be JCM. If you look at the 2 games that Daniels was healthy in recently and JCM started, it's only been 2 this season, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns for JCM, and then 67 yards, no touchdowns, and the other one. Then you look forward, okay? The 3-point underdogs against Seattle this week, 3-point underdogs next week against Detroit. We don't know if you got news today that Jaden Daniels was starting. I think it would probably flip to maybe like 1 or 2 point favorites for the Commanders, just because we don't know yet what's going to happen. And I think the Detroit line is probably factoring in that Daniels is likely to return. So you've got these 2 matchups. Then you have a great matchup against the Dolphins before their bye the following week. And then they're favored in 4 of the last 5 weeks of the season, including at the Giants in the first week of the fantasy playoffs, and then home versus the Cowboys championship weekend. He's going to grade out in the short term next 2 weeks in that running back 20 to 25 range. And so it's not going to be great. If they get down in both of those games, you're going to have 2 more games of very mediocre production from JCM. Now, they could get ahead, and that's the risk here if you want to hold out and you're like, Nick, they're going to be bad the next 2 weeks. I'll just wait for these really good matchups, trade from them. Number 1, the person who has them isn't stupid. They know that that's going to probably happen. And number 2, what if they win? What if, this coming week, Daniels comes back, or even mediocre game this week. Next week you have Detroit. What if Daniels comes back? JCM looks great. He has 80 yards and a touchdown. You don't think people are going to skyrocket him rest of season when they see the Dolphins, they see all these easy matchups, they see, Dallas in the championship. Now would be the time to trade for him. He's coming off 3 games in a row that are really bad. You still have the unknowns about when his quarterback is coming back, and he's an underdog. Now is the time when people look at that and they're like, take him for anything. I've seen people say he's on free agency at times. He, again, is not going to be an amazing play running back to the next 2 weeks. But after that, and then in week 15 and 17, he's probably going to be a top 10 play at running back. So specifically, I would say if you feel pretty solid about making the playoffs and you're okay even acquiring him and then benching him this next week, next 2 weeks, this is the cheapest viable running back you can get right now. I do not see another running back in the trade market that you can actually expect really strong production leading up to and in the fantasy playoffs that you can acquire right now for basically nothing. But JCM is that one player where that's the case. I do not think it's going to take a whole lot to get him. I think it's possible just a random flex player will get it done. People do not value him highly right now, but the role is really strong as long as they're not losing by 3 touchdowns. And I don't think they're going to lose by 3 touchdowns again this season. And I really think there's a chance that when Jaden Daniels comes back, they're just winning most of their games the rest of the season. And he's going to be really, really good in those games. As for selling Dobbins, let's be honest. No one can predict injuries, but he's missed 2 games, 17 games, 9 games, 16 games, and 4 games in his NFL career. So the odds are at some time soon, he's probably going to miss a couple games due to injury. Broncos also have, even if he remains healthy, the 3rd worst playoff schedule for running backs. They face the Packers, the Jaguars, and then at the Chiefs championship weekend. That is not a spot where I'm going to want to start J.K. Dobbins. We also see Harvey not necessarily increasing in total usage recently, but the staff clearly trusts him a little bit more moving forward. He's getting more goal line usage. He's looked a lot better. And you look at Dobbins, 4 receiving yards per game this season. It's the upside doesn't feel worth it. They're clearly wanting to get Dobbins mixed in a little bit more and more. And when you combine that with no receiving role and a terrible strength of schedule in the fantasy playoffs, plus just, again, don't want to predict injuries, but the biggest injury concern of any running back in the NFL, add all that up, and it's like, is it worth it? Doesn't feel like it. I feel like you got to just sell high right now because he's playing well, but how long is that going to continue? Then for Kansas City, for Kelce here, back-to-back solid games coming off the best game of the season, but like we've been saying, Rashee Rice is back. Worthy is healthy. The total role isn't going to be that amazing. He had like 40 yards. I think it was 38 yards on that completely broken play last week. And that will happen, right? As teams focus on Worthy, they focus on Rashee Rice, it will allow more room for Kelce. So the efficiency is going to be there. He's just not going to be as efficient as he's been recently. And let's be honest, possibility he breaks down as the season kind of goes on. But also, you just think, playoff schedule is terrible. Second worst remaining strength schedule for tight ends, and playoff schedule is second worst as well. But also it's just positionally. I don't even care if it's Kelce. Any tight end, we've seen this through the data, that is not top 2 in the end of season rankings, which Kelce, even if you think he's going to be great this season, is not going to beat out McBride. He's not going to beat out Tyler Warren, Brock Bowers. Like, that's just not going to happen, right? So he's not a top 2 tight end. The single best thing you can do at the tight end position is sell high. It doesn't matter how much you like the player. There are options for you on free agency. The only players that really matter are that top couple tight ends. He is not one of those. And so if someone in your league is like, Travis Kelce is back, gotta trade him, try to trade for him, like, the best thing you can do is trade away a tight end that will increase your playoff and championship odds. I would absolutely take any flex viable player. So anyone you can throw into your flex sometimes, just like a rotational flex player, I would take that for Kelce. And I would especially do it if you grabbed one of Gadsden, Fannin, Mason Taylor. There's no reason to roster Kelce at this point. So definitely trade him away for anyone who's flex viable and not even like a consistent flex. Just anyone you think you might occasionally rotate in to that flex spot, especially if you got some buys coming up. So that'll do it for this one. I'll see you all tomorrow. It's going to be my Week 9 rankings. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or Spotify so you don't miss out on that one. That'll do it for this one, though. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all in tomorrow's rankings video.